All right, guys, welcome to week 6. We're going to be talking about ethics and leadership. A little bit of this stuff's going to be kind of theoretical, but I'm going to try to make it as applicable to stuff that you can use as I can possibly make it. So we'll look at a little bit of an understanding of the historical background of ethics. We'll look at ethical decision making within sport. We'll look at some of the ethical issues that are kind of plaguing sports at different levels. And then we'll look at kind of a framework for being an ethical leader. So understand that, sports we've been dealing with or playing for, over 150 years. And for most of that time, the ethical decision making was, affected or impacted by social issues. And so we continue to have ethical debates, even today, probably even more so today, on things such as violence, the health, safety of athletes. There's a ton of stuff that's out there that continues to evolve. So it's not something that's brand new. So comes to this idea of really what is ethics, and a couple of ways to look at it, but it's the difference between right or wrong, but it's normally not that simple. There's always a gray area there. You can look at it as kind of a systematic study of values that guide our decision making, and a lot of it's based on morals, which are basically how we enact our ethical principles. And this is what the real struggle is, because no two people have the same set of ethics or the same set of principles. We all look at things a different way, which makes it very hard as leaders when you have people within your organization that look at things in completely different ways. So kind of the, philosophical underpinnings of ethics, two main things. Teleology, it kind of suggests that decisions are based or can be judged on what the consequences are. Whether they're going to turn out good, they're going to turn out bad, they're going to turn out right, or going to turn out wrong. Deontology, it looks at decisions that are kind of made correctly in relation to kind of the rules or conducts of what the community or the society looks at. So, meaning that, ethical decision making is based on kind of what's accepted with society as a whole. So, we have these ethical dilemmas, and, it's a problem because somebody likely or potentially could be harmed while others benefit from decisions that we make. And this is an issue at all levels, from youth up to professional sports. And commonly they kind of involve things like equity, diversity, competitive edge or competitive fairness, law, personnel, and even more likely or more common now, social media. And these things are faced on an everyday basis. So we need to look at kind of some things that are going on at every level. So obviously ethics begins at the youth level. It's probably the best opportunity to start teaching that. But youth participation and retention in recreational sport is declining every single year. We have a drop in almost every single sports participation. We've got it to where I want to say I can't remember if it's either age 11 or late age 13 is when most kids they're quitting playing sports. So a lot of things going on at the youth level. Obviously, you've got a fear for safety through overused, not adequate equipment, concussion issues or concussion fears. You've got the extreme rising cost of playing youth sports. So you have you really have no outlet for low income students, or for that matter for middle America. It's become a kind of travel ball, thousands and thousands of dollars to play sport. At the intercollegiate level, Probably the two issues right now facing most are health and safety, and then kind of lack of academic ethics or academic failings. At the professional level, tons of issues. I mean, you've got obviously the concussion issue in football. You've got the domestic violence issue. Not to mention the just win at all costs type of issue that you see at every level of sport. And obviously at the international level, you continue to have this issue of doping. And guys, these are just a few. Okay, we could spend 45 minutes talking about all those, and this is something that you'll do this week in your discussion. So, starting to look at some kind of decision making models for ethics, and this is kind of the nuts and bolts of this stuff. So, Cook kind of put out 5 points. He said decision making process is reasoning through either an actual or a potential dilemma, and that reasonable people will disagree about what's ethically appropriate, what the action should be. Not all ethical decisions are clear cut. We already talked about it earlier. A lot of them are in a gray area. There's seldom a quick fix, and sound management requires you to assess all the relevant information that's important to making a decision. In an ethical dilemma. So, a couple different things to think about as you start looking at ethical decision making. There's an individual factor to it, meaning that people from different demographics, meaning genders, age, race, culture, will look at things differently. People with different personalities will assess a situation differently. The ability from a cognitive standpoint to process a situation will cause people to look at things differently. And then there's this concept of moral development, meaning, how you've been raised will factor in on how you look at a situation. And then there's this second concept of cognitive moral development, which is basically how do we really learn what's right and what's wrong. Okay, there's not always a factor of that what we see as an egregious thing, somebody raised in a different environment may see as completely normal. Prime example, the use of marijuana by athletes. For somebody who's not raised around that, may see that as just a horrible thing, where an athlete raised around that their whole life may see it as just a normal thing. So we have to look at how we've been, I guess, kind of nurtured to get an idea of how people look at things. So we have to look at a couple things when making these decisions or developing a model to make decisions. There are always situational factors. So you have to look and see what's going on in your organization. You have to look at the law. You have to look at what are the social norms, meaning what's socially acceptable within an organization. When you make decisions, you have to look at the organization's culture. What are the missions, the goals, the values, the attitudes of the people that work there? And again, they may be completely different. And you have to look at policies that are already in place. And then you also have to look, is there an ethical code of conduct? Do we already have a code of conduct in our organization that tells us how we should go about dealing with ethical situations? So there are two broad categories or broad models. We're going to look at both of them. There's an issue contingent model and there's a practice contingent model. So for the issue contingent model, we have to look at several things. One, we have to look at what's the magnitude of the consequence of our decision. So how many people are going to benefit versus how many are going to be harmed. We have to look at the social consequences. What's the level of agreement within our organization is the decision really looked at as good or evil, or is it in that gray area? We have to look at the probability of effect, which is what is the likelihood that when we make that decision that people will be harmed or people will be benefited as we thought or predicted they would be. We have to look at the immediacy of it, meaning the time that elapses between the point when the decision is made and the point when a consequence is result. Is it going to be something that's going to come swift, or is it going to be something that's going to take a little bit of time to see and maybe not seem as drastic? We have to look at the moral intensity, which means, what's the manner in which the decision maker considers the ethical dilemma? Like, is this a hard deal for this person to handle? Is it going to be a difficult decision? Is there going to be a lot of potential options? Very rarely is there the right option and the wrong option. And then we have to look at moral judgment. If there is no right or wrong decision or no good decision, then you have to make the best choice you can, and you're going to have to deal with the consequences. And that, unfortunately, is no fun, guys. And a lot of this kind of has to deal with, how close you are to the situation. It's easy to make a decision when you're a little divorced from it and you don't have to maybe see how it affects people. Maybe you're sitting up high and it's a decision where, you have to make the decision to cut people's pay or lay people off or take their retirement away. And if you're way up the ladder, obviously you're removed from that. You're not in the day-to-day actions. But for people who are close to people, when you make those decisions, it's difficult. Okay, you see the struggle it causes people. And so as we start to become an ethical leader, we want to start to empower people to report unethical behavior. We want to look for or identify ethical dilemmas and engage people in the process so they start to understand it. And we want to maintain our integrity. And this kind of leads to this practice-based model. And these are just kind of a list of things that are steps that we can look at to start to make our best decision. And this is probably the best thing in the whole lecture, guys, because it kind of gives a real model for how to do this. So we want to identify first that we're trying to solve the correct problem, that we've identified the actual issue. Then we want to gather all the relevant information that we can do. We want to look and see if there are codes or conduct that are relevant to this. Do we already have something in place? Is there something else out there? We want to look at our own beliefs, because understand the decision that we make is going to be made in our likeness. Maybe we want to consult some people at other organizations similar to ours, see if they've had the same situation, see how they handle it. We want to list out all the options. And we want to look and see, is there a win-win possible? Maybe there is, maybe there's not. Then we have to ask the question, if we were to post out there on the internet how we made our decision, how we came to our decision, would our family be happy with that? Are we doing the right thing? Then we're going to sleep on it. Going to see the next day, is there another thought in our brain? Then we're going to make the best decision we can. And obviously, like anything that's good, we're going to evaluate it over time and see if we made the right decision, if we can change it. So, I hope that you got something out of this, guys. I know this is a difficult thing to kind of deal with, and we all have to deal with it. This week in the discussion, I'm going to ask you to kind of look at some other ethical dilemmas that you see facing organizations. You guys are doing great. Let's get through week 6.